first and foremost, and I think this is most critical, you're not going to lose your job full stop to AI. Some of those very early entry jobs, okay, they're going to get taken, but I'm still going to need a few. But let me tell you what, you will lose your job to the person that uses AI and you don't.
Hello everyone, this is your host Manoj Tandon. Welcome to another episode of Dark Rhino Security, Security Confidential. Today we have another awesome guest. Before I introduce him though, I got to remind you to hit the like and subscribe button. Again, the algorithms rule. Please go ahead and hit those and do us all a favor so that we can keep bringing you this great content. Appreciate it. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce to you folks Mr. Grant Asplund. Now, Grant has a tremendous amount of experience, over 25 years in the business. He's been helping organizations defend against sophisticated cyber threats. He's traveled globally. He's spoken globally. He's spoken at RSA, spoken to a host of analysts, partners, you name it. He's been around the block, as we would say, in the cybersecurity industry. He's got great experience with executive management at companies like Dome9, Blue Coat, Neustar, Altor Networks, and he led MetaInfo for a while through an acquisition of Neustar. He's also a podcast host. He hosts CISO Secrets and Talking Cloud podcasts, where he explores cloud security trends and real-world leadership insights. So we're honored to have you, Grant. Thank you for joining our little show.
Hey, Manoj, the honor's mine. Thank you very much. I'm thrilled to be here.
So, we got to start with your background a little bit. And I'm not talking about Lake Louise.
Sure.
Although there's a story behind it. And if you want to talk about it, that's fine. But would love to know, how the heck did you get into this world of cybersecurity?
The fact of the matter is, despite me literally kind of being in the intersection, if you will, of security and cloud and network security and business operations and risk, I've seen a lot of different technologies. But the way I got into it, frankly, was a guy bought a computer and a few months later said, "Hey, we should be selling these." And then that's how I got into the business. And then subsequently, I went to work for MetaInfo in February of 98. And 2 months later, Shlomo Kramer, came up and said, "Hey, we just acquired you." And that's how I found my way into cybersecurity specifically.
Wow. So by training, are you a computer scientist? Is that?
By training, I have a high school diploma. I always say, perseverance, hard work, and determination, or maybe pile them high and deep. I don't know which, PhD, but it's from the School of Hard Knocks. I moved out of my mom's house when I was 16 years old. And so I managed to get through high school and a wee bit of college, but I was really eager to get out into the world and try to make my mark. And that was what I did. And so, I fell into the industry. I was just unbelievably fortunate. I've said more than one time, I feel like I'm like maybe number 17 luckiest on the planet.
Wow.
Maybe even 16. My life has been very fortunate, very blessed. And so, yeah, I've just managed to stay relevant. I think, I have to give credit to my parents and my upbringing and the gray matter they gave me, because that's really what's enabled me to stay in the biz for over 40 years.
That's fantastic. There's an inspirational story here. And, we get a lot of young listeners in our audience. And there's a lot of people also who might be thinking about a switch to cybersecurity as a career. What approach should they take? Like if they are in an adjacent industry or a completely different industry and they're looking to get in here, what is the pathway you might suggest, since you've gone through the School of Hard Knocks?
Yep. Well, I mean, everyone's different. I never like to put anybody in a box for sure, but I do believe, as I've told my kids, you got to put yourself out there. So, number one, you have to have the uh, self belief, the courage to moxie, call it whatever you want, to ring doorbells, knock on doors, go to meet and greets, and put yourself out there. That's one. I think that's critical. No matter what it is you choose you want to do, there's an old saying, Manoj, I'm sure you've heard, it's not what you know, it's who you know.
Yeah.
Well, I'll throw that out the window and I'll tell you, it really is, it's not who you know, it's who knows you. And you need to
Hmm.
put yourself out there because listen, there's a whole lot of people on the list of I know
Yeah,
that don't know me. Okay.
that's correct.
So what really matters is who knows you. So where are you making waves? Where are you putting yourself out there and being heard? So put yourself out there. But more specifically, as it relates to this industry, I think one of the things that's exciting is no matter when you get into it, you're certainly getting in at the beginning of something. Okay. And it's been that way for over 40 years, and it's going to continue even at a more accelerated rate as it's faceted and stratified across far more than just the simple stamp of security, right? I mean, today with the thousands of vendors, the multiple facets, the cloud, and its introduction of a whole new surface area of threat, there's a lot to dive into. And that may also be very overwhelming for many new to the industry. And for those people, I'd direct you to the internet. There's a wealth of knowledge and information, training for pay, for free, that you can certainly become familiar. But I would suggest nothing is better than getting on the bike, getting on the horse, getting in the saddle. Now you say, okay, how can I do that? You have to be willing to pick fruit first before you own the pasture or you own the farm. You need to be willing to go. And I believe getting a help desk job of at an MSP, any place where you become a catcher of all, right? When you think about how many different questions could come in on a help desk.
Oh,
And that's a real great offering for the individual to say, what really kind of gets me going, or God, I don't care about doing that, or and it diversifies your not only exposure but your potential to demonstrate your understanding of the business.
that is some of the most practical and sage advice I've heard from a guest in a while.
Thanks.
And it rings true. It rings true. I never thought of that. The help desk would be a good starting point, because usually when people think about entering cybersecurity, they're thinking, well, I want to be a SOC analyst, or I want to be a red teamer, or I'm going to
Sure.
be whatever I'm going to be.
Yep.
I'm going to start somewhere.
Yep.
And the help desk can help lay a general foundation. I never thought of it that way, because you're
Yep.
going to get a taste of everything in that.
Exactly. You're going to get
And
somebody who's 100 feet over you, and you're going to go, oh, I don't know, I have to find out.
yeah.
And there's the great learning experience. And you're going to have people that you're going to immediately be able to satisfy. That gives you that job satisfaction. So I think it's a terrific environment. And I would suggest it's one, despite the influx of AI, and things like voice AI that's remarkably good, been trained on millions of calls to be able to actually make outbound calls for you. So, I mean, that kind of stuff's coming, but I don't think there's anything that compares to just, being out there and uh, making calls, taking calls at that most basic entry level.
Well, and I'm glad you brought up the word AI and not me. Well, it's kind of obligatory. So it's better that you did it than I did it. So,
Thanks.
but that with AI, those entry level jobs, I can see they're probably going to be the most impacted early on. I mean,
Yeah,
I can see the SOC analyst role changing dramatically. I can see even threat hunting roles changing dramatically.
no
Uh,
question.
right? Even when you're looking at security architecture, no, AI can't do the whole thing yet, but you know, it's it can certainly give you bricks. It's not going to
Yep,
build the wall, but it can give you bricks.
yep.
So, given that, is it not harder then to get into this industry, or it will become infinitely harder to get into cybersecurity? Or does one say, you know what, forget the traditional roles, I'm going to go down the AI path myself and look at how do I do agentic AI for threat hunting or SOC analysts
Sure.
or whatnot? I mean, it's a little future thinking. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Grant.
So here's first and foremost, and I think this is most critical. You're not going to lose your job full stop to AI. Some of those very early entry jobs, okay, they're going to get taken, but I'm still going to need a few, okay? I
Yep.
mean, they're not gone. But let me tell you what, you will lose your job to the person that is equal to you, maybe even less, and uses AI and you don't.
Yeah.
So I absolutely am a believer. You know, years ago, Manoj, when the cloud started really getting popular, there were companies that would say, I'm cloud first, right? Kind of implying they don't even have a data center or anything. I'm cloud first, everything. And the decisions on a new app or something, cloud first. Well, I think that's almost gone where we just, you know, I just saw an article about Benioff from Salesforce
Okay.
where he just gave his entire speech at their annual, force, whatever it was, didn't use the word cloud one time.
And they're the originators of the cloud.
Exactly. And so that is what drew me into the article. And I found it fascinating. And of course, uh, uh, agent and agentic AI was rife in the speech. Furthermore, there was talk of even changing the name to Agent Force from Salesforce, which I think is a clear indication of how profound the shift is that's occurring. All that being said, you need to understand it, learn it. There's a plethora of information you can get online, but I do believe it's a balance. But I do believe in AI first. That was where I was going with the cloud first model. Is, you know, I think everybody needs to think that way. I've introduced it to my wife, who's, you know, she owns clothing boutiques, and yet she has been really exercising it. But it wasn't without some initial training because she approached it very much like Google or something.
Exactly.
And I really stressed the importance of extracting all of the nuances and details that you want in the prompt, right? I always say, you know, you've got an assistant that knows everything that's on the internet, but is dumb as a rock without the right prompt. And if you say, hey, make this more professional, the effort you're going to get back from the smartest person on the planet is commensurate to the effort you put into asking for the information. So if you really look at what you're trying to get back by what you put in, it really makes a big difference. And the other thing is to always look at it not like, I always say it's not a sniper. I want a duck with a green head. You know, it's a volley in like badminton where you hit it and it goes and thinks, and it comes back, and then you play it and say, I want it like
Yep.
this or that. And it really, I think that's, again, something people need to really understand.
It,
I don't know that it's always coming across it. Certainly, companies don't seem to be offering that type of guidance, or at least
well,
most
I'll
of
give you
them
better.
anyway.
Even at my own company here at Dark Rhino Security, uh, we have tried to instantiate a training program and even pay people that if you do this, you're going to get some cash if you complete it.
Hmm.
I've had one person,
Wow.
not counting myself, that went through the thing, right?
Wow.
And it's a heavy lift because a lot of the technical people think they know everything, and I can assure you that they do not. I
Go,
know they do not. Okay.
man.
And they complain about the quality of AI, and I complain about the quality of prompting, and how
Mm.
you structure it is going to be what you put. If you just go to whatever your favorite AI engine, and I won't name them
Yeah.
because we all know what they are,
Sure.
but you go to it and you just say, well, make me an image of a red balloon.
Right.
You ask 10 different AI models, and you're going to get 50 different pictures.
Yep. No question.
There's no. Now, if you got to be very specific about, I want a balloon yay big and this shade of red and in the summer sun,
Right.
that's blowing in the breeze. All right. I'm making this up, but it's that level of detail that you have to successively uncover that makes the data it gives back somewhat useful. And then you have to always check and see if it's not hallucinating, because I've
Correct.
seen garbage. It just makes up shit. Pardon my
Yeah, it
French.
does.
Just makes
No,
it
it
up.
does. It does. It does. In fact, the recent Anthropic agentic attack they discovered, it was, I don't know if you saw it. It was really,
I was familiar with it. I'm glad you brought this up because it
yeah,
was
the
it was one
MCP
of the first
attack.
ones that was completely done with AI, right?
Well, it was 80 to 90%. I read the report, sucked it up into Gamma, created a presentation, and I've delivered the presentation a few times. So I'm somewhat familiar with it. But 80 to 90% autonomous, where before, 20% autonomous was a lot. So that's what made this so unusual. Highly targeted, focused on 30 companies and government organizations. Uh, Pretty extraordinary. Most extraordinary was the high amount of autonomy. Now, what saved us, and what I wanted to bring up, is you talk about hallucination. One of the things that saved us was the fact that it hallucinated on and falsely claimed it knew login credentials, and it really didn't. They didn't work, and so the sycophantic behavior, even in that complex and sophisticated environment, really is kind of what saved us on that one, or at least a facet of it saved us.
I am sure that those errors are fast being corrected.
Oh, there's no question. And we know, and you already mentioned it, 10 prompts, 10 different LLMs, 10 different models, 50 different images. It's because it's not deterministic, it's probabilistic. And
Right.
despite that probability being very high, especially as we get to deterministic questions like 2 plus 2, right? I mean, it knows it's 4. Where you're starting, I think, to see some extraordinary work is that whole MCP platform is going to be a game changer. And my biggest fear, Manoj, is the lemming effect that this has, because it's so easy, so accessible. It's just language. You can ask it anything.
Yep.
And we forget about the exposure that we have, both to prompts as they come in, and as we send information out, the DLP risks and whatnot. And, I think what really is most interesting about this, and to kind of shift gears a little, we've both been doing this long enough to know when we started this whole journey, we didn't approach it like, hey, we're building the backbone for every business on the planet. We approached it like Woodstock, come on, clothing optional, right?
Yeah.
And it was free. And so the notion of securing, it was just totally not even there. And we went from this environment is secure and have continued to try to make that environment, right, the perimeter model, smaller and smaller and smaller as the fluidity and movement of what's been inside that perimeter basically makes it irrelevant. And I've often pondered, and this is, I think, going to be even more true, is if we would have focused on the data, focused on securing the packet with the appropriate access identified at the data level when we started this journey. And I know that's easy to talk about now, but
Well,
there were some technical issues. But again, I guess my point is never more than now is the data becoming so critical, so important, and we're getting more and more and more unstructured data that's just proliferating, and I think it really represents one of the biggest risks we have.
so there's a couple questions that follow up with that. So first of all, where does an organization even begin?
Mm.
Right? So, and I'm going to frame this. Let me give you a little bit of background on this so you can focus your attention or your answer. Most companies view cybersecurity as a techie thing. They're just looking at it as a pure, I'll put in some DLP at endpoint, some MFA. It's like they're walking down a shopping cart at the cybersecurity store and just picking up a little bit. I'm CMMC. I need this control. I'm going to grab that. I'm going to grab a little bit of this. And then they get hacked.
Yeah.
And they lose a lot of data. So where did they go wrong? I mean, I have an opinion about this, but I want to get someone of your stature to
to throw under the bus.
No, not at all.
No,
not at all.
I mean,
I think this
honestly, I think first of all, I often see that some of the most basic blocking and tackling gets overlooked. Just some of the most critical, fundamental patching and implementing multi-factor authentication and some of the things that are like no-brainer. But people are still not doing it. I think every organization needs to build their environment as if they will get hacked, and subsequently, how can they minimize it, right? And that
brilliant. Yeah.
includes, microsegmentation, making sure that blast radius is contained, to minimize lateral movement. Because the fact of the matter is, Manoj, with the advent of the same tools we were just talking about
Yep.
that are going to eliminate the positions that we have in the early part of the ladder, so to speak, in this
Yep.
industry on the plus side, baby, it's coming at us in spades on the bad side. The nefarious are putting this stuff to work, and as it improves, it's going to be more and more challenging for us. And I think that people need to be prepared for the onslaught.
And this is usually where we begin with is let's start with protecting the revenue chain and make sure that when something bad happens, because it's not a question of if, it's just a question of time until something goes wrong. You're not operationally disabled. Plan for that. If the person down in HR can't access HR files, well, you're not operationally disabled. But if you can't ship whatever it is that you make money with, or whatever your product or service is, you can't execute that, well, it doesn't really matter what the HR person is doing because you're not making money. And it's game over. As Jaguar Land Rover recently learned the hard way,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? It was
Well,
probably
I go ahead.
no, I was gonna say that the biggest cyber attack probably that's ever the biggest loss that's ever happened. I mean, the UK government had to bail them out,
Yeah.
billions of
Well,
dollars.
I would suggest that even in those instances, as you spoke of, it really comes back down to protecting data. To properly inventory it, classify it, make sure you determine who has access to it, and assume that it's going to move. And I believe security programs that continue to be very infrastructure centric, kind of perimeter centric, we need to shift to being data centric, and then scale how people actually work.
So that's nuanced. Can you get into a little bit more detail with that? It's brilliantly nuanced, but it is nuanced.
So we have to look at architectures, for example, that think about the challenge if I have a bunch of data on available. It's data within my organization, and I'm implementing agents to access various uh, data stores. How are you going to control an agent that is responding to a prompt that's coming from a vice president versus an administrator or a manager if it's going to the same agent? You have to have the granularity within your infrastructure to be able to control the data so that the data, based on the access of the data, that's what the agent will allow. So if it's coming from a vice president, the agent's going to allow that access based on the vice president's access controls to the data. Working the other way around makes it much more challenging.
So here's a question for you then. I mean, you look at the good folks at Okta, they recently announced at their big annual show that they're going to be able to protect each agent as its own unique identity, right? Which on the surface seems like a good idea, but Grant, based on what you're saying, what should we really not? The agent should have, and maybe I get this wrong, the agent doesn't have its identity. It inherits the identity of the interrogator. So if a VP of whatever business unit is interrogating it, it's taking that inheritance of roles and permissions and performing the queried search for the answer, versus if somebody from shipping is
Precisely.
pulling it. So the agent itself is neutral. It has no identity by itself, but it inherits the identity of
Yeah, and I
the.
guess it's whether you're talking about identity as opposed to access control, but you get it. The idea of an agent being able to go into the data and get what you are requesting, it's the control of that action as opposed to if I've got it controlled from the data side, I already know the only action I can respond to is one from a vice president, then the data is not going to respond if that's how the agent operates. So, this is important nuances in terms of the implementation of how your products are working together. There are products that'll do that.
Well, it's
So
one of the big issues when if you're going to let Copilot loose in your environment.
there's no question. I mean, I wonder how many people really understand when you have an agent sitting on your shoulder looking at everything, i.e., reading every email and summarizing it for you. It's also susceptible to a prompt injection, white text down underneath the footer. You can't see it. That's talking to the LLM or the agent. Companies have to have protection against that as well.
That means that this has now become even a much more daunting task of creating
Oh,
some.
Listen, here's how I look at it. And remember, man, I'm just a Gilligan. I've managed to stay in this exciting industry for a long, long time. But my view of what's going on, so to speak, is everything is moving incredibly fast, and it's going to only move faster. This whole AI phenomenon is an accelerant. Arguably, it's nitroglycerin like we've never seen before in every way imaginable. And when you think about it like this, we now have almost like an eighth layer in the stack. And I know it's not there, but when you think about what's doing processing now is not limited just to that server that has access to some data, but it's a model, an LLM. And the commands aren't coming from Python or whatever comes out of your application. The commands are English or just language, whatever you type in. That's that causes action, and that command can trigger a series of activities
Yeah.
outside of the LLM that you're initially prompting. And so we have to think completely differently about the environment we're securing uh, because it's literally hiding in plain sight.
And that means that data is accessible to all who know how to get at it. So this is what might lead some business leaders to say, we don't want to adopt AI internally on our own data. We're not going to do it. But then,
Or look differently at how you're adopting AI with your data. Start with the data first and work the other way. Um, there are solutions that won't tie you to the wrapper that only works with Grok or Anthropic, but will support multiple models.
yeah. Uh, but then
Once
what
again,
you said,
it's why I believe so strongly we need to start with the data and work out, as opposed to out in.
and you used the word data classification earlier on in this podcast. I mean, that's been years and years people have been trying to do that. Now it becomes even more important to be able to do
Oh,
it, right? And we still don't have it right. So
it,
again, it would be like, what hope is there?
So I think that's an area where there's been tremendous improvement in the accuracy, the flexibility, the control of how you go through and actually classify your data. I think that there's huge advancements. I think there's a handful of companies that are doing, some cool stuff there. More at a higher level, I have long believed had we started with data first, it'd have been zero trust by design, right? I mean, but that's not how we've been working.
Well, remember when DARPA designed the internet, it was a fail-safe for nuclear war, right? It was imperative that the messages get through at all cost. Didn't matter the
Yep,
route they took, how they took. It
yep.
was important
Why
that
DNS
messages
is
got
so
through.
unbelievably remarkable, and still today, it's hard to believe how it operates when it could be so poorly configured. It's some gnarly stuff, but I think that your point is well taken. Also, why it was free, right? Also,
Yeah,
why anybody could get it and have it. So, I different objectives at the time.
yeah, and with any tool that's put out there, as people get their hands on it, how they use it, you just don't know. And
True.
and and in some instances, I guess I would ask Grant, are some of these tools or the tool centric world of cybersecurity, is that going to, how is that going to evolve with now AI coming in? Because it's almost becoming, you need your own robot to fight the other robot, and no one makes one robot.
Yep.
Everyone's got their little piece of the pie. So how do you think, what's the future there look like in your view?
So, in my opinion, because hey, it's just it's worth, about how much coffee's left in this cup, I guess. Um, to me, there's going to be just an unbelievable exploit on both sides of the fence with agents, and you're going to see that just go crazy. Some people are going to have agents that are going to be proprietary to them. Others are going to build agents that are going to be more, I think, interoperable. And with MCP, that's going to be a big game changer as well. It is only going to be the only way we're going to have a chance is to fight fire with fire. I believe that. And, one of the things that I think we have to just be fully on board and understand is this is a battlefield, if you will. This is an environment that will live forever because, as a CEO I know says, it's a constant battle of learning. That's what cyber is, right? Figuring out and learning something to beat you or figuring out a way to better protect you. It's really quite interesting. And the one component about cyber that sets it apart from kinetic war is anonymity. And as long as we have that anonymity, we're always going to have people willing to fill that space with nefarious activity.
Yeah. And as long as it's profitable, right? That's the
Totally.
biggest thing. If you took the money out of the equation, a lot of cyber attacks would stop. Not all of them, because
no, some are nation
there's
state. Yeah,
nation state stuff is not motivated by money. They
no,
want data, as
yeah,
you very eloquently stated. They want the data,
yeah,
right?
totally.
At any cost. But yeah, the ransomware crowd, sure.
But even the fact of the matter is that's data. If you're focused on securing and protecting that data, then what happens on the outside, it becomes less, right? So if you're data focused, theoretically, you're not going to have ransomware impact you because you've secured your data.
I can tell you, and I think you know this, that even people who think they've secured their data, or even better yet, have objectively done something as simple as kept good backups, when the time comes, 70% of the time, they're not able to recover out of those things. And
True.
that's a terrible statistic.
Yep. And I would suggest again, Manoj, if you have set it up correctly on the front end, even God forbid if it occurred, the recovery would not be nearly as painful. I mean, I think, we have to understand. I mean, look you've heard it, right? Nobody's breaking in anymore. They're logging in. So again, we need to just kind of assume that. So we need to make sure one of the things I failed to mention that I wanted to, that you were talking about agents and identity. Dude, there are already so many non-human identities in the world, especially if you're using cloud, right? To introduce even more, that is another area that really needs some ease of use and comprehensive management. It's all these identities, how to properly deprecate, how to find, dead ones that aren't doing anything but have permissions over permissioned
oh Lord,
identities.
that's been an issue for the last 30 years, Grant.
Yep. But it's exacerbated by the number of non-human identities that are in the mix, I would suggest.
Yeah. I like
That's
that.
what makes
People
it,
aren't hacking in, they're logging in. And that's very
totally.
true. Anymore now, you can find an identity that is compromisable and
Yep.
compromise it and literally log in.
Yep. Yep. It's
And
true.
then and then depending on your skill as an operator, you can probably move laterally through
Yeah.
the organization. Or you can fish them properly, or you can convince a customer support person to let you in through the front door. I mean,
Well, hey,
they're
God knows, man, phishing, if you haven't taken a look at the level of sophistication we're seeing in phishing, it's just, it's beyond, you cannot believe it. So nothing's misspelled, everything's proper, even to the point where it's investigating who you work for, because this is some people sometimes forget. We all have a tendency to want to shake the pom poms, for example, when we get a new job, right? We put out that I got a new job and hey, this, right? But if you think of the mind of the hacker, he sees Manoj just got a new job. So he immediately sends his AI reconnaissance tools after who you work for, who's your boss, other critical initiatives at the company, and crafts a phishing email that comes from your boss's boss and then to your boss and then to you that says, it's critical you complete this survey before the end of the week. And it can be quite difficult to tell it's not really a thread from inside your organization. Stuff's getting good.
it is getting good, and it's going to continue to get better.
It is.
It is, and the fact of the matter is that it works. And you look at a larger organization, if you've got 30, 40,000 employees, the law of averages says someone's going to click on it.
Yeah, it's against you for sure. This, and you just said something, Manoj, that I think people have to also understand. This is why they're kicking our ass unless we really step up from a protection perspective with AI. And what I mean is, just a couple of years ago, if you asked AI to show you an image of a hand, for example, that hand might have 6, 7 fingers and a thumb coming out of the middle of the palm because it was not really well educated and trained on what a hand looked like. But it was pretty good, but not perfect. And so there's not one CEO on the planet that would say, yeah, let's put that into production. But certainly the nefarious would say, yeah, let's put it to work. Why? Because it was better than what they had before. Perfect? No, but more effective than what they did before. So let's go with it. So this is the flaw of striving for perfection and getting pummeled by good.
You're absolutely right. I think it wasn't it the bad guys are basically following General Patton's philosophy. A good plan executed today is better than a perfect plan executed tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. And because, as we already discussed, the probabilistic nature of the models,
Yeah.
it creates a conundrum for us.
So what is a CISO to do? So what would you tell a new CISO in an organization? Where do they begin their journey?
You know, of course, I think what matters is size of organization will play
Sure.
a big role, right? I mean, because the CISO of a 1,000 employees or 500 employees, as opposed to 50,000, I think they're different. But I think overall, today's CISO really has to be a translator to be able to explain risk in business terms to the board, to make really hard trade-offs, say no without slowing the business or company down. And technical depth matters, but in a large organization, you're going to have a team and a staff, and judgment and communications becoming more critical than necessarily being a techno wizard. Don't forget, fundamental blocking and tackling, right? And, in the world of zero trust, that means nothing is assumed, nothing is inherited, everything is from zero. That means access, that means privileges, that means rules, access controls. And one of the reasons that's difficult is it's a lot of work. It was so much easier to just say, who do you work for? IT? Okay, you're in the IT group.
Yeah, it is a lot of work. And traditionally, CISOs have not had a seat at the big boy table, right? They don't report to the board in a lot of instances, or
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
They typically
That's changing, though, I think. Don't you think, Manoj? I mean, it seems
I
like.
hope so. It's changing. It's slow, but it would be to me. And I've said it. We've had this debate on the show, but I think the CISO should be an independent. They should not be a part of the IT organization. They should not be reporting to the CIO.
Go straight to the CEO, you think?
CEO or CFO or
Mm-hmm.
COO. Preferably, actually, someone responsible for risk.
Right.
Whoever shoulders the burden of risk, which automatically would be the CEO. But the COO is responsible for keeping the company operationally.
Yeah, I would say COO is who I would think of then.
They
As
should go.
opposed to straight to the CEO.
Yeah, and they should, because otherwise you have a conflict. If you work for the CIO and you're challenging the systems that are in place,
Yeah,
well,
doesn't work.
it
Yeah,
doesn't
doesn't
work. I
work.
mean, when you're thinking
No.
about your bonus that pays for your condo in Florida, you're like, you know what? Do I want to do security or do I take the bonus? And I don't want to hear. I said it. I did say it.
Yeah.
There's not a single human being that is not going to think that.
Well, you're certainly going to evaluate and assess based on your own benefit in most instances, right? I mean,
It's
that's
human
human nature.
nature.
That's
It's
why
human
we
nature.
work, right? We don't work to give it away. We work for ourselves. And I think that, uh, it's one of the mistakes people make. I think I just saw who was it? Was the CEO of Coca-Cola? McDonald's? McDonald's. The CEO of McDonald's was talking, and he said, hey, listen to you young getting started in the world. No company is going to care about your career. No company is going to look out for you and make sure your career is on path. And so don't look to any company to take care of you and your career. You need to take care of you and your career. And I think that we get sometimes seduced, especially with companies, that it's all about our people and we couldn't do it without our people. And yes, all that is true. But at the end of the day, push comes to shove. You'd be out the door in a heartbeat if their business decision said, let's get rid of that person. So you always have
Yep.
to be looking out for yourself, where you're going, driving your own career.
That's a good place to end this episode on, but not before we give you some free reign of the mic. And tell us anything you want to plug out there, Grant, that you want to let the audience know about. Whatever you'd like.
Come check out Talking Cloud podcast. I'm going to probably change the name. I'll keep the same RSS feed just because we talk about everything, anything similar to this in many ways. Just remember that security done right doesn't slow down the business. It actually should enable trust, speed, confidence in overall decision making. When security and governance are aligned, I think that's how business really, and if it's aligned with how business operates, everybody's going to win. So I'm going to say it again. I think, do the blocking and tackling, but remember, it isn't all of it. It's no longer about the perimeter. It really is about the data. And I think when you shift that mindset to really having clear visibility, governance, intelligent control of your information, security becomes a real enabler rather than an obstacle.
Sage advice, Grant. And it's been a pleasure having you here. Please don't be a stranger.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much, Mano. It's great being here.